Good morning, guys, and happy Tuesday. You are almost all the way through your short week, which is great. And it's still so cold outside. I guess I always thought I was kind of a Michigan weather warrior. I've lived here for probably 20 years, maybe more than that now. This kind of cold, though, it just gets me. I would rather have it maybe like 30 degrees and lots of puffy snow. So like good snowball packing snow. This kind of snow outside is like useless fluff, and it's just despicable and terrible, and I hate it. So anyway, hopefully it'll warm up a little bit. Today we are going to do our readings about Ludwig van Beethoven. I hope that you enjoyed your documentary that you had a chance to watch yesterday about that. He obviously very interesting character, interesting life. I'm stretching it a little bit to call him a classical composer. He is right at the end of the classical period, and he really marks the transition into a whole new way of doing things, and he's the reason why, honestly. Need more coffee. Okay. So today, we're going to go ahead and get started with our reading from The Lives of the Musicians book, Good Times, Bad Times, and What the Neighbors Thought. Here we go. So Ludwig van Beethoven was born in Bonn, Germany in 1770, and he died in Vienna, Austria in 1827, just like Mozart. Looks like Vienna is kind of where you go to die. He was a German composer who was the dominant musical figure of the 19th century, particularly famous for his 9 symphonies. Music, not cooking, good manners, or fashion, was Ludwig van Beethoven's whole life. His father began giving him piano lessons before he was 4 years old. Young Beethoven was so small that he had to stand on the piano bench in order to reach the keys, and his father rapped his knuckles whenever he made a mistake. Neighbors recalled him as a tiny boy weeping in front of the piano. When he was a little older, his father roused Beethoven at midnight to show him off to friends he brought home from bars. That's not good parenting. By the time he was 12, Beethoven was an organist at court. He was already publishing music and earning a salary that kept his family going when his father, an alcoholic, could no longer take care of them. At age 16, he caught Mozart's attention, and we learned about this. Keep your eyes on him, the older composer is said to have urged people. Someday he will give the world something to talk about. Beethoven had a difficult childhood, but he could be playful. One day he bet a church singer that he could throw him off stride by playing variations as he accompanied the singer on the organ during the service. The singer accepted the challenge, but Beethoven won the bet. The singer was distracted, and Beethoven did get in trouble. Eventually, he became known as the greatest pianist of his time. He could play so beautifully that his listeners wept. And when they did, he would burst out laughing. "You are fools," he would say. Yet, if people talked while he played, he would stalk off in a huff. And if he didn't like the audience, he wouldn't perform at all. His talent and powerful personality attracted many friends, but his moodiness could make it hard to stay friends with him. He insulted everyone. For an overweight violinist, he wrote a song called "Praise to the Fat One" on his brother's business card, which read Johann von Beethoven, landowner. Beethoven scrawled Ludwig von Beethoven, brain owner. Once, he became angry with a prince who was important to his financial health, telling him, "There are and there will be thousands of princes. There is only one Beethoven." That is an ego. A policeman arrested Beethoven one day for acting suspiciously. By this time, the composer was very well known, and the policeman refused to believe that the great Beethoven could look as he did. The fashionable hairstyle of the day was careful pigtails, but Beethoven let his thick hair grow long and wild. He also couldn't be bothered with clean or stylish clothes. When his clothes became too dirty and disgusting, his friends took them away during the night and brought new ones, and Beethoven never noticed the difference. Even Beethoven admitted that he was not physically attractive. "I cannot love what is not beautiful, or I should be loving myself." He was short, with a huge head and hairy hands. His face was scarred from smallpox, and he had sad, nearsighted eyes. In later life, his ears were stuffed with pieces of cotton wool soaked in some yellow fluid. Only his protruding teeth were always clean. He constantly rubbed them with his napkin. Gross. One of his favorite foods was macaroni and cheese. Hey, mine too. He also liked red herrings, a mushy soup of bread and eggs, and strong coffee that he made himself, exactly 60 beans to the cup. I don't know how much is in here because I just made it in my Keurig bag there. He was notorious for his bad cooking and for his behavior in restaurants. Once he got so mad at a waiter that he dumped a plate of veal and gravy on the man's head and laughed. He had a loud laugh and a loud, annoying voice, and he liked to spit. Sometimes he left restaurants without paying, and sometimes he wrote music on the bill. "I am never alone when I am alone," Beethoven said. He usually got up early in the morning to compose and then later walked through the streets of Vienna, muttering, growling, and stamping his feet. He carried bulging notebooks of music with him at all times. His handwriting was so messy that almost no one other than himself could read it. So in the afternoon, he'd go to a coffee house to gossip and read the newspapers. Sometimes he worked all night, by moonlight, going without food or sleep. More to keep awake than to get clean, he would pour pitchers of water over his head, which annoyed his downstairs neighbors when the water flooded the floor and leaked through their ceiling. When a group of boys peeked in his ground floor window one time, they caught him working in his underwear. His room was even more shocking. Dirty laundry, half-eaten food, rusty pens, scribbled papers everywhere. There was even a full chamber pot under the piano. Do you know what that is? It's gross. His landlords didn't like him, and he had to move once or twice a year. Beethoven would have been difficult to live with. One woman who rejected his proposal of marriage called him ugly and half crazy. He always had to have his own way. He never married, but he was always in love, often with a woman who was already married or engaged. The saddest thing about Beethoven's life was his gradual deafness, beginning in his late 20s. But he was used to writing music he couldn't hear. As a child, he had been too young to play the compositions he wrote. As his hearing grew worse and worse, he lived inside his head more than ever and kept on writing music with no loss of energy. He broke strings on his piano, trying to pound loud enough so that he could hear the notes. Frustration made him more moody, even at times suicidal. Beethoven conducting an orchestra was a sight to see. He would leap into the air during the loud parts, waving his arms toward the skies, sometimes shouting without being aware of it. And then he would crouch low during the quiet parts, almost creeping under the music stand. Audiences loved his music. In his last public performance, he began to cry when someone turned him around to make him aware of the roaring applause that he couldn't hear. He died of liver failure at age 57. The legend is that he roused himself from his bed at the end during a violent thunderstorm and shook his fist at the sky, defiant as ever. Mozart's Requiem, the same work Mozart had thought he was writing for his own funeral, was played at Beethoven's funeral. It was a sad day for Vienna. 1 out of 10 people who lived there came to pay their respects, and that's a huge city, so that's a lot of people. Here are some musical notes. Possibly the most famous notes of all time are the first 4 notes of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, 3 short beats followed by 1 long beat. Some people think they represent the knocking of fate at one's door. Do you know what that's talking about? I know you do. It's just dun 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 dun, dun 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 dun. Everyone has heard that. So famous. Now you know it's Beethoven. The last movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is choral music set to Schiller's poem, Ode to Joy. You also know this. The music has inspired people ever since it was written. It was played, for example, during the Chinese student protest in 1989 and when Germany's Berlin Wall came down in 1990. That one is Dun 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 da 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 da. You know that one, right? Yeah. Beethoven dedicated the famous Moonlight Sonata to 18-year-old Countess Giulietta Guicciardi. He was in love with her, but he was also in a tight spot. He needed to take back another dedication he had made to her and give it to someone else. The famous piano piece called Für Elise may have actually been meant as Für Therese, a pupil who ended up refusing Beethoven's proposal of marriage. So that gives you a little glimpse of Beethoven's life, and we will move on now to a reading from Bach, Beethoven, and the Boys by David Barber, this book that you've grown accustomed to hearing me read from, for another take on Beethoven's life.